Welcome to the Designated Drinker Show, the podcast that's raising the bar on craft cocktails. I am your host, Louise Salas, and with me, as always, is my very, very talented friend who is a lover of all things spring, the mixtress DC Gina.
Hi, Louise.
Hi.
That is 100% true.
Do you have little baby chicks yet and little ducklings? Those things happen in the spring in your little farmette?
So in the winter, you order them or you pre-order them, and this year, chicks and ducks and anything that lays an egg is like high commodity.
Yes.
Yeah. So and we know that the egg farmers become the new drug dealers. So I'm totally psyched. So yes, we are adding
an ovo dealer.
I know, right? I know, seriously. We added chicks and ducks. And then it's also our busiest time of the year, right? Because we're planting and seedlings and...
I want you to be the Huevos Cartel. Huevos Cartel.
I mean, yes, right? Do you want me to speak Spanish only?
Yes, do it. Because I can't.
I love this time of year. It's my muddiest, greatest, salt of the earth touching.
Yeah.
Mud. I don't know. It's my favorite.
'Tis the season.
Yes.
Yes.
I can't wait for my old ducks to meet the new ducks. They get so mad every time I introduce a new duck to the flock. They're like, "What is this?" They get quacking.
So
crazy.
you don't have like chicka bam time with your own for your ducks and your chickens. So you make your own ducks and chickens.
I do have one Drake, and he's a little aggressive, but just because he mixes with only one kind of duck, and what I've learned is that other ducks they don't really cross, make babies, so it's good. But this year we're getting geese too, so that should be fun.
Ooh, geese are mean.
Yeah, apparently we didn't know this, but when you have a farm, you need at least one set of a goose and a gander because they're better than a watchdog.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, they literally, if anything's happening, they are like, so I want to.
Yeah, they're mean as hell from what I understand.
Honking.
Honk, honk,
honk. I'm good at the, like a duck, but not like the honk. Yet. And they're also very active at full moon, so that's why I know that they're like completely in tune with the earth.
There you go. Well, I think most animals are. We're just
it's insane.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right, so let's go back to the show, shall we?
Yes.
All right, so all this talk about spring brings us to the spring equinox. So that you know, it's March 20th, and it officially marks the end of winter and the beginning of spring. And I'm sure you know this, Gina, but in case somebody doesn't, it's a very old pagan holiday that's been celebrated around the world by the ancient cultures: Germanic, Celtic, Roman, Mayan, Persian, century-old holiday. And still today, pagans and Wiccans consider the equinox a significant holiday and celebrate with rituals that, this totally makes sense, honors new life and new beginnings. Thus spring. I mean, let's be honest, that's Easter, right? Heretic. So, in fact, just so you know, occultism has been on the rise in this country for a long time. We're going to go back to 2019. The Pew Research Center found that there were approximately, at the time, about 1.5 million people who identified as Wicca or pagan. And this is what's crazy. And that might not sound like a lot, but it outnumbered the members of the Presbyterian Church. Yeah, there's about 1.4 million of them at the time in 2014. Now, but they say by 2050, the number of practicing pagans in America is projected to triple to 6.6 million people, which sounds like a lot, but really, apparently, it's about 1.5% of the population. So obviously, it's becoming more and more popular, but I think many people don't quite understand. So this brings me to today's...
Like doom metal. Nobody understands that.
No idea what you're talking about now.
Exactly.
But so let's get back to the show. So I'm going to edit that out because I don't know what to do with that. So to help us understand the many facets of occultism, we have today's designated drinker. From magic to mysticism to mind reading to mentalism to seances to psychic readings. That's what today's designated drinkers are going to talk to us about. So please welcome to the show the celebrity occultists, Dan and Kat Eckhart. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having
Hello, glad
us.
to be here.
Yeah. So that was a lot, so much, but can the two of you please just simply help level set and help us understand what is occultism?
Yeah, so the occult, Kat and I were talking about this just a few days ago. Like, what is the occult? Because we think about magic, we think about witchcraft, like all these things are kind of floating around, paganism, Wicca, etc.
Levitating. If you
Sure.
will.
But occultism has a specific kind of thread that it follows, which is really based out of a kind of Hermeticism. So looking towards Hermetic philosophy, which mythologically we trace all the way back to Egypt. But really, the occultist is kind of a researcher. It's someone who looks for the common threads in multiple magical traditions and pulls those forward and says, okay, what is the common praxis here? And what is the common metaphysics? And from that, what can we find that actually works when we're practicing magic?
Right. So what are we studying? It's astrology, it's divination, it's old techniques of magic, going back to Greek culture, Egyptian culture, and much more. As you know, occultism has been around for as long as humans have been around. The term was coined in the 15 or 1600s. And it was associated with all things hidden.
Yes.
So hidden knowledge, especially having to do with the stars.
So there's nothing in the word occult that means like a cult of people, like a cult of, it's somewhere out in South California, doing like UFO worship.
So we're not
going to drink any Kool-Aid or anything like that.
Watching comments.
Right.
and
The word
that,
occult simply means hidden. So an occultist is someone looking for those hidden traditions, often within other hidden traditions. So looking at something like Wicca, which would be considered kind of hidden or downplayed, or it's becoming bigger now, but certainly it wasn't always. The occultist looks into the metaphysics of Wicca, into the practice, and says, well, what are these things that are valuable here, and what are the things that we can kind of move on from?
A little bit of pick and choose. I'm
It's
kidding.
development, because magic is an art and a science. And so there needs to be forward progression when we talk about magic. Magic isn't a religion in the same way that we look towards dogma and we look towards instruction and we look towards traditions to orient our place into the world. Magic is kind of a forward-moving, ever-evolving process.
Yeah, it's more of a practice than having to hold a certain set of beliefs. Although there are beliefs that are more associated with occultism and paganism. And that's where you're going to draw back into earth-based practices and revering nature.
Animism.
Things like that.
Oh, I actually put that in my notes.
Wait a minute. You said animism?
Animism.
Is that like I'm guessing I think I know the answer, but I feel like now I don't. So
So animism,
probably do.
You probably do. Most
Okay.
people do, they just don't call it animism.
Okay.
Animism is one of the oldest kind of spiritual beliefs, and it's simply that everything has a spirit.
Oh.
It's different than panpsychism. Panpsychism is the belief that everything has like a psychic reception or psychic projection. Like, so a panpsychic belief would be that the plant can speak with me and I can speak with the plant. Animism is more that the plant has a being and is an expression of being. So there's a little bit of nuance there. But in animism, everything is speaking with
I'm just
us.
going to tell you that plant isn't real. No, I'm kidding.
What?
No.
Come on.
No, it's so interesting because you mentioned that in when we were talking the other day, and I didn't know really a true understanding of the word. And I Googled it, how did we ever live
Sure.
without it, and went to good old Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And I was going to ask you really, and you guys jumped right into it, what was your view on this? And it's really interesting because at the basis, when you talk about, and I'm going to tell you, magic is an odd word for me to use in this
Sure.
space. It's interesting the way I look at theology really has to do with like from a historical base than
Sure.
from a belief base. So if you look at occultism or that type of practice is the right word.
Yeah.
It's funny how much there is crossover, and the fact that the truth is many of our Christian religion beliefs are based on older
Sure.
cultural beliefs in pagan whatnot. We had a really great guest during the holidays. A little bit, we listened a lot on that. Yeah, no, Kyle.
Oh, Kyle.
Yeah, we listened a lot. We didn't get to talk much on that one, but he was demystifying Christmas and talked about
We
the pagan
actually
religion
listened to that
and where
episode.
Santa comes
It's a
through.
good episode.
It's a great episode. Yeah.
Yeah, he was full of so much knowledge, but it's really interesting is to see how those beliefs, to your point when you're saying you look at where they come together and take what's great about them and try to leave behind what's
What's no longer useful. And I think that's the way to frame conversations around occultism, is like what matters and what is useful. And that doesn't mean that people don't find value in exploring like Gardnerian Wicca, something very grounded in like a 1940s to 60s kind of view of magic. But the occultist is interested in like the belief that there's magic for our time, that there is a specific type of magic that makes the most sense now. And that's a co-creative conversation between practitioners, between spirits, between the planets. Like, what is the medicine we need for now? Today, ceremonial magic isn't going to make as much sense as it did in the Edwardian era.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to like dress up like
look
pharaohs.
different.
That's weird.
I would like to bring back that though, because all of my favorite gardens are grounded in that, and I think that like I love that.
So you want to do your gardening dressed as a pharaoh?
No. The Edwardian era, they had like they in plain sight, they had gardens where they would be able to go outside and like perform their ceremonies and stuff, but like it would have been on the grounds or available to everybody, and nobody realized what it was. It was hidden in plain sight.
Yes. So the occultist would say, okay, cool. The garden component is something that we should really like resurrect. Like we should be out in nature. We should be working with the cycle of the planets, but we can still leave behind you going out into your garden dressed as a pharaoh. Like that, that's no longer useful.
Right. I know, I understand. Yeah, I understand that.
I think
but
that's
feel
the only
like
reason Gina wanted to do it.
my whole goal is to figure out how I can wear a turban and a caftan for the rest of my life. So you are correct.
I think we should normalize, wearing things that are comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And cotton. So if we're thinking about, and loose fitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just be yourself, kind of like, you're being.
Yeah. And I mean, dress up and performance can be a part of ceremonial magic.
Right. Ritual. And the idea that like, so from a magical perspective, when we put on a certain attire, maybe the reason we're putting on that attire is it makes us feel the most magical while we're in it. It's not necessarily holding the wand that actually endues the working with magic and with power. It's the fact that that is the play acting we do that allows us to bypass the conscious mind and work directly with the subconscious.
Huh.
Oh, I do love that.
Well, it again, if you go back to other like more say traditional religions, and especially this part of the world, I mean, think about what nuns wear or priests wear or bishops. I mean, like the big giant hats like look like buckets on top of their heads.
Yeah.
It's just kind of those things, or the swinging of the essence and the smoke and all of
The
those
myrrh.
the myrrh. Yeah, all of I was like, whatever that stuff is. I was not raised Catholic, obviously. I think it's as unusual or different as
Or frankincense.
mainstream.
Is it myrrh or frankincense?
Sure.
I can't remember.
Frankincense.
It's smoky,
I thought
whatever
it
it
was
is.
like sage. I can't quite remember. It smelled wonderful.
Yeah. I believe it's frankincense
Yeah.
now. It's frankincense.
I believe it is.
You know better than I.
Sorry, I just had to, just do a quick,
Going back.
Did I ever use it in a cocktail? No, because it's poisonous. Okay, great. It's that. Got it.
But I think that
My Rolodex is going crazy. Okay,
I heard
sorry.
it.
I know.
Yeah. But I think to that point is that when you talk about like makes you feel a certain way, it is part of what would be mainstream tradition or religion that we see that happening, and maybe seeing a wand makes some of us scratch our head and go, huh.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you start looking at all the things through the same lens, then you kind of go, huh.
Yeah, it's the question of like, why do these symbols, why do these tools, why do they resonate with us? What affects us beyond just like a cultural component of, oh, I go to church and see the priest doing whatever. What affects us about the actual like ritual on a subconscious level? And I think whether we're talking about like mainstream religions like Christianity or Islam or Judaism, or less mainstream religions like, Gardnerian Wicca, we're still looking for symbol sets that impact us in a deeply felt way, that give meaning and allow us to enact agency.
I need a second to digest that, because I'm just, what came to my mind is like when you're saying this, right, is like Baha'ism, right? Like,
Sure.
So
Yeah.
So Baha'ism to me really isn't like really encompassing all the religions. It's accepting it, whatever. It's more of the picking and choosing of what should stay about those religions and go, which is it's like almost like its own version of occultism, right? Because you're picking what's best
Sure.
for the common good of man.
Mm.
Do you believe that, or am I like crazy on saying that? Because like I feel like every more you talk, I'm like, well, it just keeps reminding me of like
that sounds a lot like chaos magic.
It does. And it's important to note like how influential quote unquote Eastern religions are in modern magical praxis. Mostly because they do provide a different frame of reference or a different way to think about the world. But chaos magic, as Kat said, is totally that idea of, and not even selecting things for the betterment of humanity or the betterment of the world, but selecting things that make the most sense for you as a person. Because everybody's individual like way of interfacing with the world is going to be slightly different.
Right. And it can be different from moment to moment.
Yes.
So you can do a ritual based in like a Christian tradition in the morning, and then in the evening do a satanic rite.
Right.
And there would be no sort of cognitive dissonance there. You just adopt different beliefs based on what you're intending for the ritual.
It's funny, you just made me go, what? Yeah. But if you think, I do things that are absolutely like, oh, why do I throw salt over my shoulder? You know, like literally those is what we might say superstitious or superstitions. But that, it's funny, I did when you said the difference between, you know, the gods and that we all get these rigid views of these things, but as you're talking about like, oh no, we do that all the time. Why do I say bless you when you sneeze? You know, like all of the things that we do, it's very interesting. You're just like level setting all of these things.
Well, we see that a lot in folk magic. Like if you look at Portuguese folk magic or Italian folk magic or Mexican folk magic, it all has this kind of orientation around a Catholicism because that's like the cultural religion, but it also has its own unique explorations into figures like Kat mentioned, like Lucifer or Santa Muerte, or these figures that the church itself is like, I don't know if we can officially sanction this.
It's called a simulation.
But the people have no cognitive dissonance between, oh yeah, I worked with the devil on Saturday and I'm going to mass on Sunday. Yeah. And yeah, the priest might tell me that's a bad thing, but I've known that priest since he's a little boy. And, you know, I'm just here for the Eucharist, right? Like,
that's hungry. No.
I do that every day. I work on Saturday night in a bar, serve a bunch of drinks to everybody, and then I go and pretend that I'm a great Catholic on Sunday with my kids. You know, so I identify with that.
Okay, great.
Well, I mean, if you really think about like religious journey, especially when you go into like Day of the Dead, I mean, those are very old traditions that predate the Catholic Church introduction to Mexico. And you're right, it is totally acceptable and brought in. And, you know, I put an altar every year. I ask my parents to come back. Yeah. The evil spirits in my home. That cannot be any further than most Christian views, but it is 100% a part of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the reverence for our ancestors is really what drew me into an Orthodox practicing of Christianity, and then ultimately that led to occultism. Yes, so it's Christianity led to occultism. I like that. No.
Going straight to hell.
Well, that's where all the cool people are.
That's what I always say. Yeah, but I'll know everybody there.
Is that really how you got there? Is that like something like you were like how? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the ways. I mean, there are many things that drew us to magic and occultism.
Yes.
And a lot of it was based on seeking that mysticism and spirituality that I knew was imbued in the world around me. And I just wanted to join a kind of community of people and belief set and system that really elevated that belief.
That is one of the funniest things when we talk with people who are coming from a Christian perspective or from a space of either firm religious Christianity or a cultural Christianity, which is like, how does Christianity lead you to occult practice? And historically, whether we're talking about Catholicism, because it's come up, or other lower denominations, like say a Baptist denomination or something like that, that's more low church, not so liturgical. If we look to their histories, most of the magical grimoires written in the Middle Ages were written by priests, and they were written by monks. So there is a tradition of magic, of occult magic, of I'm taking command of the elements, I'm working my will in the world within these traditions. Even, I grew up Pennsylvania Dutch. The Long Lost Friend is a folk magic grimoire for Pennsylvania Dutch people who otherwise would be like, magic, Harry Potter, that stuff's evil. But I still totally do this ritual because it works. And that's the beauty of like a chaos magic perspective is, oh, we can just do these things. Like we have agency.
I find Pennsylvania to be a fascinating place, by the way. I'm not kidding. Every time somebody brings up something comes from there. And I believe it's because when people, migrated from Europe, a lot of people landed in Pennsylvania. And it's just an interesting...
And a lot of them were religious weirdos. Yeah. Like a lot of them left because they had like weird beliefs. And that's cool. Like I'm a big lover of weird beliefs. So whatever. But there is this...
I did find that funny coming out of your mouth. Just,
right.
I was just like...
Yeah. So you see like this real... there's a book by Mitch Horowitz called Occult America, and it's excellent because he goes through the history of the way hidden occult beliefs, and whether it be witchcraft or magic or whatever, influence the way we kind of perceive our American society today. Things that we otherwise wouldn't associate with like these hidden traditions. But the most prominent that comes to mind is spiritualism out of Rochester, New York.
There were all kinds of kooky, weird religions that came out of upstate New York.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So many.
Jenny Cream Ale came from
super
upstate New York.
influential.
It's a beer. It's terrible. Sorry.
No, super.
Sorry, it's Disney drink show. Sorry.
It's fine. Super influential to the point where at the height of the spiritualist movement, we have Abraham Lincoln. We're right in Virginia. Abraham Lincoln's right across the way in the White House, and he's holding a seance during the Civil War, and allegedly got military advice on how to run campaigns in the Civil War based off of his time with a medium at a seance. So when we think about these things, magic sometimes gets a rap as being like very low culture. It's not something the elites do. It's not something, unless you're like conspiracy. But magic is something for people who aren't so serious. When we look at the history of it, like people have been working this sort of work, even in spaces that we wouldn't assume that they do.
I definitely believe in all of that. I love, first of all, a good psychic's the best. Mm-hmm. A good medium's also really wonderful. I stopped seeing the medium after my grandfather passed away, and I went to see one with my mother, and it was too real.
Too real.
And I just was like, and they were like, well, she's like, well, your family's very open. I said my grandmother was a straight guy, and they're like, we know because we can talk. We like literally was able to speak to him, and like very quickly. And I was like, yeah, but you wouldn't know that about him. And like it was just too. It was a lot, right? So like I stopped that because I knew that like I was gonna dive too far. And like for me, and like I don't mean that like as in there's certain people in your life that you don't want to like open that. For me, I don't want to open that.
Sure.
I get nervous about that kind of stuff. And I have a daughter that's very in tune with like space, and she's somewhere else. She's doing something else is happening to her. And I'm like, she reminds me so much of my grandmother, and it's so weird. And I'm always like, because it's like just seeing like another person come back, and she never met my grandmother. My grandmother was deceased when she was born. So
incredible.
So speaking of spirits, Gina.
Yeah. Speaking of spirits, I think it's time for.
I think it's time for a tip and trick.
It's definitely time for, I would say, an enlightenment.
There you go.
Instead of a tip, we're going to do an enlightenment.
Oh, there we go.
So we're here with a new trick today, right? Well, is it a trick? Is it a little magic? I don't know, but we're going to talk about it. So, why is it when you cut a piece of fruit or citrus that you're just like, oh my gosh, it just smells so great, and all of a sudden you have a smile on your face? When you smell pink grapefruit or blood orange or pineapple, and you're like, oh, it's just making me happy. Well, is it magic, or is it your senses, or it's just what, the feelings that it brings? It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And using them in your cocktails, you add grapefruit to a salty dog, or, blood orange to a Negroni. It has a different context, and it makes it really happy. Well, some of the things we're gonna talk about today is just kind of putting in, grapefruit, right? What goes with grapefruit? Why is it so wonderful? Well, with grapefruit and cinnamon is like a wonderful combination, and it invokes a feeling of happiness and remembrance. So is it a cocktail trick, or is it a little bit of witchcraft? I don't really know, but altogether it doesn't matter, because when you put the two, it's just so wonderful. When you take blood orange and you're like, oh my gosh, blood orange, it just smells so wonderful on its own. And you're like, that's really great. And you take a little bit of ginger, just raw ginger, and you kind of like make the two marry together, just ever so slightly. And you hold them open and you smell it and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a whole different smell. It's a different profile, it's a different flavor. Sure, you'll juice these things and use it in your drinks, but experimenting with the way that it makes you feel and the happiness that you take from it is what makes your drinks personal to you, and it's the magic in your glass.
So Gina, I have to admit, I would have never thought about putting grapefruit and cinnamon together.
Isn't it nice? It's lovely. And it really smells, and it really like speaks to you. Like, it kind of like, it just makes you happy, the two scents together. But like also when you taste it and stuff like that, it's just like a different, it's just a different feeling. And like, you know, it's like really rich in like Indian culture.
You know, grapefruit always makes me happy, especially when you put tequila in it.
Same.
That's how I like my grapefruit.
Thank God for those Mayans.
Yeah, I know. My peeps. So where are they going to go to get this tip, tricks, and how?
You're going to go to designateddrinker.show for all my tips, tricks, and enlightenments.
That's
and also
designateddrinker.show.
And also how to get to our guest today.
Yeah, because you definitely want to find out some more.
Or you could just think about it.
Yeah, I was just like, didn't just go.
Yes,
just
or they can think,
call
or
them.
they can thank you to them.
Yeah, there you go. Do
Thoughts?
a Reiki-ish thing. I don't know.
Reiki?
Yeah. Reiki. I don't know. I'm trying to do
Are we
something.
Reiki?
Astral projection is probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah. See.
Yes.
Or telepathy.
See, I wasn't far off.
I'm telling you,
It's my chaos. I bring Reiki to the table.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
All right, with all that silliness, it brings us to the end of this very magical part 1 with celebrity occultist Dan and Kat Eckhart. But if you're anything like me, or anything like Gina, God help you, one round is just never enough. So go top off that drink and get ready for part 2 of this episode as we continue our boozy banter. And Gina's going to share a delicious Dan and Kat-inspired cocktail recipe. So you know it's just going to be downright magical. Har, har, har. The Designated Drinker Show is produced by Missing Link, a Latino-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, we craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Also in the Missing Link lineup of podcasts is Roger That, a podcast dedicated to guiding you through the haze of dementia, led by skilled caregivers. Now, if you're looking for a whole new way to enjoy the theater, check out Between Acts, an immersive audio theater podcast experience. Each episode takes you on a spellbinding journey through the works of newfound playwrights, from dramas to comedies and everything in between. Find Missing Link's League of Podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And while you're there, please don't forget to follow, download, and review the shows. Your reviews help our shows reach new audiences. To find out more about Missing Link, visit missinglink.company. That's missinglink.company.